Welcome, welcome, one and all, to Storytime with Jonathan. The first, and probably only, by the end of this, edition of me telling the boys a delightful, wonderful tale. I'm joined, of course, by the rest of the Bone Hunting Vikings, Zach, Evan, and Danny, listed in no particular order.
Bonjour!
Listed in reverse alphabetical order. Reverse alphabetical, so technically a particular order.
That's what I said, saving the worst for last.
Well, you could say that. You could. I wouldn't stop you.
I just did.
Yeah, I'll say that too.
Alright.
Yep.
I'll agree. I'll jump on that train.
Now.
See, everyone's on board.
Alright, everybody's on board. Some of you in the audience may be familiar with this masterful piece of storytelling that I'm going to share with the gentlemen today. As you are aware, this is one of the greatest stories ever told. Folks, this is a story about a man named Jack. And a man named Samuel. And a
Can you call
man...
him Zach?
What?
Can you call him Zach instead of Jack?
You know what? Sure, I'll try and call him Zach. But if I misspeak and call him
Yes.
Jack, just know that it's the same man. Anyway, this is a story about a man named Zach/Jack. A story about a man... This is a story about a man named Jack/Zach. And this is a story about Nate. Nate the Snake. I hope you gentlemen are comfortable. So there's a man crawling through the desert. He had decided to try his SUV in a little bit of cross-country travel. Had great fun zooming over the badlands and through the sand. Got lost, hit a big rock, and then he couldn't get it started again. There were no cell phone towers anywhere near, so his cell phone was useless. He had no family, his parents had died a few years before in an auto accident, and his few friends had no idea he was out here. He stayed with the car for a day or so, but his one bottle of water ran out and he was getting thirsty. He thought maybe he knew the direction back, now that he'd paid attention to the sun, and had thought he'd figured out which way was north, so he decided to start walking. He figured he only had to go about 30 miles or so, and he'd be back to the small town he'd gotten gas in last. He thinks about walking at night to avoid the heat and sun, but passed upon how dark it actually was the night before, and given that he had no flashlight, he's afraid that he'll break a leg or step on a rattlesnake. So
Sounds like he wasn't really prepared for what he was getting himself into.
one would say yes. No, he was not prepared at all. So
Do we
he
know what
puts on-
desert he is in? Specifically.
So the story takes place somewhere in America.
Okay, so probably what area?
More than likely, yes.
Yeah, probably.
The
Wait, is this
initial
Nate?
word- No, this is we're
Wait,
still
what's his
currently
name?
talking. It's not Nate. Nate hasn't shown up yet. We'll
Whoa,
get to
who's
Nate.
this guy?
This
On
is
his
the-
SUV, does it have an American flag flying?
You know, seeing as how this is supposed to be Zach Jack, I will let you decide.
Yes, it did. It
All
was
right.
in the wind to this day.
There's an American flag trailing behind the vehicle. Perfect. Anyway, where
Oh,
was
so
I?
this is Zach in the desert.
This is Zach in a desert. Yes.
Wow,
This
Zach,
is
you're
the
an
character.
idiot.
This is the character named
Sounds
Jack.
just like Minecraft.
What?
Yeah,
Sounds
it's
just like
like
Minecraft.
You know, it kind of does. Anyway, let's see. Puts on some sunblock, puts the rest in his pocket for reapplication later, brings an umbrella he'd had in the back of the SUV with him to give him a little shade, pours the windshield
You
wiper
mean to
fluid.
tell me he doesn't have a flashlight, but he has sunblock on him?
And an umbrella.
Mary
And like
Poppins.
one
style.
bottle of water.
Listen, he had
30 miles into the desert.
You've met Zach, right?
All right, you got me there.
Pours the windshield wiper fluid into his water bottle in case he gets that desperate, brings his pocket knife in case he finds a cactus that looks like it might have water in it, and heads out in
Now
the
that's
direction he
Zach.
thinks is right. This is 100% Zach now.
The
walks
Desert Project?
The Desert Project. He walks for the entire day. By the end of the day, he's really thirsty. He's been sweating all day and his lips are starting to crack. He's reapplied the sunblock twice and tried to stay under the umbrella, but he still feels sunburned. The windshield wiper fluid sloshing in the bottle in his pocket is getting really tempting now. He knows that it's mainly water and some ethanol and coloring, but he also knows that they add some kind of poison to it to keep people from drinking it.
I'm sure he'll be fine.
He wonders what the poison is, and whether the poison would be worse than dying of thirst. He pushes on, trying to get to that small town before dark. By the end of the day, he starts getting worried. He figures he's been walking at least 3 miles an hour, according to his watch, for over 10 hours. That means that if his estimate was right, he should be close to the town. Unfortunately, he doesn't recognize any of this. He had to cross a dry creek bed a mile or two back, and he doesn't remember coming through it in his SUV. He figures that maybe he got his direction off just a little, and that the dry creek bed was just off to one side of his path. He tells himself
I
that
have a question.
Yes.
He came in an SUV.
Yes.
Were there not, like, tire tracks?
Good question. This is Zach we're talking about.
True.
That's the answer to everything.
Thanks
You
for
did
wanting
set
to be
yourself-
the main character, bud.
I was gonna say, you set yourself up for that one, though.
I mean, fair enough.
I mean, you volunteered to be the main character.
And I'm proud of it. I have no regrets. No regrets.
He tells himself that he's close, and that after dark he'll start seeing the town lights over one of these hills. That'll be all he needs.
What a
As it
genius.
gets... See? As it gets dim enough that he starts stumbling over rocks and small things, he finds a spot and sits down to wait for full dark and the town lights. Full dark comes before he knows it. He must have dozed off. He stands back up and turns all the way around. He sees nothing but stars. He wakes up the next morning feeling absolutely lousy. His eyes are gummy, and his mouth and nose feel like they're full of sand. He's so thirsty that he can't even swallow. He barely got any sleep because it was so cold. He'd forgotten how cold it... What?
Zach,
What?
What?
what are you laughing at?
I
I
just
could've
laughed
sworn.
at a word Jonathan said.
What, gummy?
Sure.
Yeah.
Alright, yep, alright. He'd forgotten how cold it got at night in the desert, and hadn't noticed it the night before because he'd been in his car. He knows the rule of threes. 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. Then you die. Some people can make it a little longer in the best situations. The desert heat and having to walk and sweat isn't the best situation to be in without water. Unless he
sure
finds
that-
Maybe you should
water.
have brought more water.
Sounds like a skill issue.
Yeah, like, it's just... Just don't dehydrate. Like, what are you doing?
It's not that hard.
Just
It's
drink
literally
water.
70% water. Just drink yourself.
Thanks, chemist. Unless he finds water, he figures this is his last day. He rinses out his mouth with a little of the windshield wiper fluid. He waits for a
Great
minute
idea.
after spitting that little bit out to see if his mouth goes numb, or if he feels dizzy or something. Has his mouth gone numb? Is it just in his mind? He's not sure. He'll go a little farther, and if he still doesn't find water, he'll try drinking some of the fluid. Danny, how
How does it
horrible of an
taste?
idea is that?
What?
You're the chemistry man. How horrible of an idea is that?
To not have water for a day?
No,
Drink
to
wiper
drink, to
fluid.
drink windshield wiper fluid.
I mean, people get drunk off of crazier stuff, I guess.
I mean, fair.
Or are you talking
How-
about the ethylene glycol?
Yeah, I'm talking about, like, is it going to kill him?
I'll let you keep going. I'll let you keep talking about the story.
Alright, you're not gonna answer the question.
No.
Danny is a professional headlight fluid. Doggone it. Professional windshield wiper fluid drinker.
That's what he does. He's
I have burned my
sad,
college for so long.
Anyway.
Wait,
Then
how,
he
how does
has-
it taste? The fluid.
I don't know,
Ever
Zach.
had
I
cool
want
blue
a
Gatorade?
description.
Also, yeah, wait. Danny's got
Ever
an
had cool blue Gatorade? I say, ever had cool blue Gatorade?
I have.
It's a
probably
little bit
like
more
that.
alcohol with that.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Delicious.
So the character likes the taste then.
I mean, you're the
I don't know
character, Zach. I don't know, does he?
I don't know what psychopath likes cool blue over any other type of Gatorade.
Orange supremacy. Anyway,
I prefer
Then
red, but
yes.
blue's still good.
then
That's
he
good.
has to face his next harder question. Which way does he go from here? Does he keep walking the same way as yesterday, assuming that he still knows which way that is? What?
I thought you said west.
Alrighty. Does he keep walking the same way as yesterday, assuming he still knows which way that is, or does he try a new direction? He has
should
no
go
idea
down.
what to do.
As long as he doesn't come from the direction he already came from.
Looking at the hills and dunes around him, he thinks he knows the direction he was heading before. just going by a feeling, he points himself somewhat to the left of that and starts walking. As he walks, the day starts heating up. The desert, too cold just a couple of hours before, soon becomes an oven again. He sweats a little at first, then stops. He starts getting worried at that. He knows that when you stop sweating, you're in trouble. It's usually right before heat stroke. He decides that it's time to try the windshield wiper fluid. He can't wait any longer. If he passes out, he's dead. He stops in the shade of a large rock, takes the bottle out, opens it, and takes a mouthful. He slowly swallows it, making it last as long as he can. It feels so
Delicious.
good in his... What?
Delicious.
Delicious. It feels so good. Where's that line? Where's that line? I just lost my place. Doggone it.
It feels so good.
It feels so good in his
Oh,
dry
it feels
and
good,
dry throat
alright.
that he doesn't care about the nasty taste. Well, I guess that answers that. He
He
takes
can finally
another
swallow
mouthful.
again.
He takes another mouthful and makes it last too. Oh, that was your funny word. Alright. Slowly, he drinks half the bottle. He figures that
Oh,
since he's
that
drinking
one,
it,
you know.
he might as well drink enough to make some difference and keep himself from passing out. He's quit worrying about the denaturing of the wiper fluid. If it kills him, it kills him. If he didn't drink it, he'd die anyway. Besides, he's pretty sure that whatever substance they denature the fluid with is just designed to make you sick. Their way of keeping winos from buying cheap wiper fluid. Keeping winos from buying cheap wiper fluid for the ethanol content. He can handle throwing up if it comes to that. He walks. He walks in the hot...
Oh, he's gonna dehydrate himself more.
Zach, are you aware that you were going to dehydrate yourself more?
No, I'm completely clueless of the situation.
Fantastic.
All right.
He walks. He walks in the hot, dry, windless desert. Sand, rocks, hills, dunes, the occasional scrawny cactus.
Wait. It's windless, which means it's easier to see the tracks of the car he went in because the sand's not blowing everywhere.
Exactly.
Zach.
Alright, just making sure I got the situation.
Okay, yep, you got the situation. You're all clear now, okay? Just remember, you are the protagonist, so you missed the tire tracks.
Uh-huh. I got it.
Yep. Okay.
Yep. No, wait. Did he
And-
go out into the desert in like a straight line?
Zach, how did you go out in the desert? I believe it was a straight line.
And why didn't you
A
just
Z.
walk the opposite direction of the car?
I saw a cactus.
You're so dumb.
But
He walks in
have
the
you ever
hot,
seen
dry-
a cactus?
He walks in the hot, dry, windless desert. Sand, rocks, hills, dunes, the occasional scrawny cactus or dried bush. No sign of water. Sometimes he'll see a little movement to one side or the other, but whatever moved is usually gone before he can focus his eyes on it. Probably birds, lizards, or mice. Maybe snakes, though they usually move more at night. He's careful to stay away from the movements. After a while, he begins to stagger. He's not sure if it's fatigue, heat stroke finally catching him, or maybe he was wrong and the denaturing of the wiper fluid was worse than he thought. He tries to steady himself and keep going. After more walking, he comes to a large stretch of sand. This is good! He knows he passed over a stretch of sand in the SUV. He remembers doing donuts in it, or at least he thinks he remembers it. He's getting woozy enough and tired enough that he's not sure what he remembers anymore, or if he's
Donuts
hallucinating.
taste good.
I would think there would be sand in the desert.
He thinks he remembers it.
If he's
so he
doing
heads off-
donuts, does that mean he's a cop?
I don't know, Zach. Are you a cop?
Sure. If my character likes
Alright.
doing donuts.
So was it a regular American flag, or was it a thin blue line American flag?
It was a regular American flag, but I
Alright.
went out to the desert with my cop car.
It's an SUV.
Yeah, those exist.
I'm changing the story.
So you purchased a patrol SUV for your own personal use, and have an American flag hanging off the back of it.
No, I just stole it.
All right.
Well, he's a cop. That's why he went for the donuts.
Yeah, I guess. He remembers doing donuts in it. Let's see, we're past there.
Do you see the marks of all the donuts you did in it? Because I think those would
He doesn't
like,
see any
leave a
marks
track
on it.
behind.
Speaking
He
of, it's
thinks he
windless.
remembers it. He thinks he remembers it, so he heads off into it, trying to get to the other side, hoping that it gets him closer to the town. He was heading for a town, wasn't he? He thinks he was. He isn't sure anymore. He's not even sure how long he's been walking anymore. Is it still morning? Has it moved into afternoon, and the sun is going down again? It must be afternoon. It seems like it's been too long since he started out. He walks through the sand. After a while, he comes to a big dune in the sand.
Hasn't he been doing that for like 13 hours now?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
After a
Making
while,
sure
he...
I'm keeping up.
I bet he's pretty
gotta
hot
make
at the
sure you keep
moment.
the timeline. After a while, he comes to a big dune in the sand. This is bad. He doesn't remember any dunes from when he was driving over the sand in his SUV. At least, he doesn't think he remembers any. This is bad. All the same, he has no other direction to go. Too late to turn back now? He figures that he'll get to the top of the dune and see if he can see anything from there that can help him find the town. He keeps going up the dune. Halfway up, he slips in the bad footing of the sand for the second or third time and falls to his knees. He doesn't feel like getting back up since he'll just fall down again. He keeps going up the dune on his hands and knees. While crawling, if his throat weren't so dry, he'd laugh. He's finally gotten to the hackneyed image of a man lost in the desert, crawling through the sand on his hands and knees. It would be the perfect image, he imagines, if only his clothes were more ragged. The people crawling through the desert in the cartoons always had ragged clothes, but his have lasted without any rips.
What's he wearing?
An officer uniform, obviously.
Obviously.
Why are we so committed to Zach Jack being a cop?
Because he did donuts.
Doing
on duty?
donuts and eating donuts are two different things.
Clearly,
Shut up,
they're two
narrator.
different things. Why do you think they're jelly filled?
Alright.
Zach, you disgusting person.
The people crawling through the desert in the cartoons always had ragged clothes, but his have lasted without any rips so far. Somebody will probably find his desiccated corpse half buried in the sand years from now, and his clothes will still be in fine shape. Shake the sand out, give them a good wash, and they'd be wearable again. He wishes his throat were wet enough to laugh. He coughs a little instead, and it hurts. He finally makes it. He finally makes it to the top of the sand dune. Now that he's at the top, he struggles a little, but manages to stand up and look around. All he sees is sand. Sand and more sand. Behind him, about a mile away, he thinks he sees the rocky ground he left to head into this sand. Ahead of him, more dunes, more sand. This isn't where he drove his SUV. This is hell, or close enough. Again, he doesn't know what to do. He decides to drink the rest of the wiper fluid while figuring it out. He takes out the bottle and starts removing the cap when he glances to the side and sees something. Something in the sand. At the bottom of the dune, off to the side, he sees something strange. It's a flat area in the sand. He stops opening the bottle and tries to look closer. The area seems to be circular, and it's dark. Darker than the sand. And there seems to be something in the middle of it, but he can't tell what it is. So he looks as hard as he can, but still can't tell from here. He's going
It's
to
a
have to
black
go
donut.
down there and look. What?
With the black donut.
Chocolate
That's my
covered.
prediction.
How big is this thing that he sees?
It's bigger than a donut. It's much bigger than a donut.
Oh, it's a big donut.
It's we're talking world record size donut here. He puts
Like,
the bottle back
I was gonna
into
say tire-sized donut, but okay.
No, we're huge. We're bigger than a swimming pool sized.
Like,
Oh,
at
okay.
least 2 donuts.
Yeah, like at least 2. Maybe even 3.
He puts the bottle back into his pocket and starts to stumble down the dune. After a few steps, he realizes that he's in trouble. He's not going to be able to keep his balance. After a couple more sliding, tottering steps, he falls and starts to roll down the dune. The sand is so hot that he thinks he's caught fire on the way down, like a movie car wreck flashing into flames as it goes over the cliff before it ever even hits the ground. He
Sounds
closes
like
his
hell.
eyes and mouth. He closes his eyes and mouth, covers his face with his hands, and waits to stop rolling. He stops at the bottom of the dune. After a minute or two, he finds enough energy to try to sit up and get the sand out of his face and clothes. When he clears his eyes enough, he looks around to make sure that the dark spot in the sand is still there and he hadn't just imagined it. Seeing the large, flat, dark spot on the sand still there, he crawls towards it. He'd get up and walk towards it, but he doesn't seem to have the energy to get up and walk right now. He must be in the final stages of dehydration, he figures as he crawls.
You sure he's not just lazy?
If this place in the sand doesn't have water, he'll likely never make it anywhere else. This is his last chance. He gets closer and closer, but still can't see what's in the middle of the dark area. It's hard to focus, and lifting his head up to look takes so much effort that he gives up trying. He just keeps crawling. Finally, he reaches the area he'd seen from the dune. It takes him a minute of crawling on it before he realizes that he's no longer on sand. He's now crawling on some kind of dark stone. Stone with some kind of marking on it. A pattern cut into the stone.
Aliens.
He's too tired to stand up. He's too tired to stand up and try to see what the pattern is, so he just keeps crawling. He crawls towards the center where his blurry eyes still see something in the middle of the dark stone area. His mind, detached in a strange way, notes that either his hands and knees are so burnt by the sand that they no longer feel pain, or that this dark stone, in the middle of a burning desert with a pounding, punishing sun overhead, doesn't seem to be hot. It almost feels cool. He considers lying down on the nice, cool surface. Cool, dark stone. Not a good sign.
Definitely alien.
He must be hallucinating this. He's probably in the middle of a patch of sand, already lying face down and dying, and just imagining this whole thing. A desert mirage. Soon, the beautiful women carrying pitchers of water will come up and start giving him a drink. Then, he'll know he's gone. He decides against laying down on the cool stone. If he's going to die here in the middle of this hallucination, he at least wants to see what's in the center before he goes. He keeps crawling. It's the third time that he hears the voice before he realizes what he's hearing. He would swear that someone had just said, "Greetings, traveler. You do not look well. Do you hear me?"
It's the merchant.
What are you, boy? It's not the merchant. What voice should I use? What voice should I use for this voice? Because it's one of the 3 voices in the entire story.
German.
Use the merchant voice.
I've heard merchant and I've heard German. What are we thinking?
The German merchant.
Combine them. Yeah.
Greetings, traveler. You do not look well. Do you hear me? He stops crawling. I'm gonna hate doing that for the extended period. He stops crawling. He tries to look up from where he is on his hands and knees, but it's too much effort to lift his head. So he tries something different. He rolls over and leans back, trying to sit up on the stone. After a few seconds, he catches his balance, avoids falling on his face, sits up, and tries to focus his eyes. Blurry. He rubs his eyes with the back of his hands and tries again. Better this time. Yep, he can see. He's sitting in the middle of a large, flat, dark expanse of stone. Directly next to him, about 3 feet away, is a white post or pole about 2 inches in diameter and sticking about 4 or 5 feet out of the stone at a 45
Hey, 2 inches
angle.
is pretty big.
It's 2 inches around.
Yeah, pretty big.
Alright. And wrapped around this white rod is what must be a 15-foot-long desert diamondback rattlesnake, with a hovering tail and rattle seemingly prepared to start rattling, looking directly at him.
Is that the German?
He stares at... well, I'm not going to tell you that. You'll have to stay tuned and find out. He stares at the snake in shock. He doesn't have the energy to get up and run away. He doesn't even have the energy to crawl away. This is it, his final resting place. No matter what happens, he's not going to be able to move from this spot. Well, at least dying from a bite from this monster should be quicker than dying of thirst. He'll face his end like a man. He struggles to sit up a little straighter. The snake keeps watching him. He lifts one hand and flicks it in the snake's direction, feebly. The snake watches the hand for a moment, then goes back to watching the man, looking into his eyes. Maybe the snake has no interest in biting him. It hasn't rattled yet. That's a good sign. Maybe he isn't gonna die of snakebite after all. He then remembers that he'd looked up when he'd reached the center here because he thought he'd heard a voice. He's still very woozy. He feels like he might pass out soon. The sun still beats down on him, even though he is now on cool stone. He still doesn't have anything to drink. Although, maybe he had actually heard a voice. This stone doesn't look natural, nor does that white post sticking up out of the stone. Someone must have built this. Maybe they're still nearby. Maybe that was who talked to him. Maybe this snake is even their pet, and that's why it isn't biting. He tries to clear his throat to say hello, but he's too dry. All that comes out is...
What was that?
What?
It says all that comes out is a coughing...
Oh, that
all
does
the-
not sound like a cough.
The text says all that comes out is a coughing or wheezing sound. I don't know, like...
Do you want to know what that sounds like, Jonathan?
No, Zach!
Please do tell.
It's not even gonna be in the video anymore, huh?
Gosh darn it.
All that comes out is a coughing or wheezing sound. We're just gonna have me read it. We're not gonna have the sound effect.
I need a sound effect. I don't understand what you mean by that.
Oh, got it. All right. He tries to clear his throat to say hello, but he's too dry. All that comes out is a coughing or wheezing sound. There's no way he's going to be able to talk without something to drink.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Can you repeat that?
All that comes out is a coughing or wheezing sound. There's no way he's going to be able to talk without something to drink. He feels his pocket, and the bottle with the wiper fluid is still there. He shakily pulls out the bottle, almost losing his balance and falling on his back in the process. This isn't good. He doesn't have much time left by his reckoning before he passes out. He gets the bottle open, manages to get the bottle to his lips, and pours some of the fluid into his mouth. He sloshes it around, and then swallows it. He coughs a little. His throat feels better. Maybe he can talk now. He tries again. Ignoring the snake, he turns to look around him, hoping to spot the owner of this place, and croaks out, "Hello? Is there anyone here?" He hears from his side, "Greetings. What is it that you want?" He turns his head back towards the snake. That's where the sound seems
Totally
to come
Hitler.
from. No, it's
It's definitely Hitler. I'm sorry. I just can't.
100%.
then we'll make him not German.
No,
No, you
he
keep it
is
now.
who he is.
He turns his head back towards the snake. That's where the sound seemed to come from. The only thing he can think of is that there must be a speaker hidden under the snake, or maybe built into that post. He decides to try asking for help. "Please," he croaks again, suddenly feeling dizzy. "I'd love to not be thirsty anymore. I've been without water for a long time. Can you help me?" Looking in the direction of the snake, hoping to see where the voice was coming from this time, he is shocked to see the snake rear back, open its mouth, and speak. He hears it say, as the dizziness overtakes him and he falls forward, face first on the stone, "Very well, coming up." A piercing pain shoots through his shoulder. Suddenly, he is awake. He sits up and grabs his shoulder, wincing at the throbbing pain. He's momentarily disoriented as he looks around, and then he remembers. Crawl across the sand, the dark area of stone, the snake. He sees the snake, still wrapped around the tilted white post, still looking at him. He reaches up and feels his shoulder, where it hurts. It feels slightly wet. He pulls his fingers away and looks at them. Blood. He feels his shoulder again.
So
It
Zach, you
feels...
got bit by Hitler.
At least we know our character isn't Jewish.
Good lord. Hitler
Why,
into
because he's
this.
alive?
You're the one who did the accent.
Because you guys told me to do German merchant.
It's not my fault that just so happens to sound like Hitler.
Alright. Alright.
Anyway,
He feels his shoulder again. It feels like his shirt has 2 holes in it. 2 puncture holes. They match up with the 2 aching spots of pain on his shoulder. He has been bitten by the snake. "It'll feel better in a minute." He looks up. It's the snake talking. He hadn't dreamed it. Suddenly he notices he's not dizzy anymore. And more importantly, he's not thirsty anymore. At all. Have I died? Is this the afterlife? Why are you biting me in the afterlife? "Sorry about that, but I had to bite you. That's the way I work. It all comes through the bite. Think of it as a natural medicine." "You bit me to help me? Why aren't I thirsty anymore? Did you give me a drink before you bit me? How did I drink enough while unconscious to not be thirsty anymore? I haven't had a drink for over 2 days. Well, except for some windshield wiper fluid. Hold it! How in the world does a snake talk? Are you real? Are you some form of Disney animatronic?" "No," says the snake. "I'm real. As real as anyone else is, anyway. I didn't give you a drink. I bit you. That's how it works. It's what I do. I bite. Plus, I don't have hands to give you a drink, even if I had water just sitting around here." The man sat stunned for a minute. Here he was, sitting in the middle of the desert on some strange stone that should be hot but wasn't, talking to a snake that could talk back and had just bitten him. And he felt better. Not great, but he was still starving and exhausted, but much better. He was no longer thirsty. He had started to sweat again, but only slightly. He felt hot in this sun, but it was starting to get lower in the sky, and the cool stone beneath him was a relief he could notice now that he was no longer dying of thirst. I might suggest that we take care of that methanol you now have in your system with the next request. Continued the snake.
Meth.
Methanol, not methamphetamine.
Meth.
I can guess why you drank it, but I'm not sure how much you drank or how much methanol was in the Viper fluid. That stuff is nasty. It'll make you go blind in a day or two if you drank enough of it.
Kind of what moonshine's made of, if I'm not mistaken.
Next request, said the man. He put his hands back on his hurting shoulder and backed away from the snake a little. That's the way it works, if you like, that is. You get 3 requests. Call them wishes, if you wish. The snake grinned at his own joke, and the man drew further back from the show of fangs. But there are rules. The first request is free. The second requires an agreement of secrecy. The third requires the binding of responsibility. Snake looks at the man seriously. By the way, my name is Nathan. Old Nathan, Samuel used to call me. He gave me the name. Before that, most of the bound just used to call me Snake.
We all know that's not his name.
But that got old.
No, we all know.
But that got old, and Samuel wouldn't stand for it. He said that anything that could talk needed a name. He was big into names. You can call me Nate, if you wish. He said that anything that could talk needed a name. He was big into names. You can call me Nate, if you wish. Again, the snake grinned. Sorry if I don't offer to shake, but I think you can understand. My shake sounds somewhat threatening. The snake gives his rattle a little shake. My name is Zach, said the man, trying to absorb all of this. Zach Sampson. Can I ask you a question? Zach says suddenly. What happened to the venom, in your bite? Why aren't I dying now? How did you do that? What do you mean by that's how you work? That's more than one question. But I'll still try to answer all of them. First, yes, you can ask me a question. The snake grins widely. Second, the venom is in you. It's changed you. You now no longer need to drink. That's what you asked for. Or, well, technically, you asked to not be thirsty anymore, but since anymore is such a vague term, I decided to make it permanent. Now, as long as you live, you shouldn't need to drink much at all. Your body will conserve water very efficiently. You should be able to get enough just from the food you eat, much like a creature of the desert. You have been changed. For your third question, you are still dying. Besides the effects of that methanol in your system, you're a man, and men are mortal. In your current state, I give you no more than another 50 years, assuming you get out of the desert alive, that is. Nate seemed vastly amused at his own humor, and continued his wide grin. As for the fourth question, Nate
Should
said,
have been 69 years.
As for the fourth question, Nate said, looking more serious, as far as Zach could tell, as Zach was just now working on his ability to read talking snake emotions from snake facial features. First, you have to agree to make a second request and become bound by the secrecy, or I can't tell you. Wait, joked Zach. Isn't this where you say you could tell me, but then you'd have to kill me? I thought that was implied. Nate continued to look serious. Yeah. Zach leaned back a little bit as he remembered that he was talking to a 15-foot venomous reptile with a reputation for having a nasty temper. So, what is this bound by secrecy stuff? And can you really stop the effects of the methanol? Zach thought for a second. And what do you mean methanol, anyway? I thought these days they use ethanol in wiper fluid, just to denature it. They may. I really don't know. I haven't gotten out in a while. Maybe they do. All I know is that I smell methanol on your breath, and that bottle in your pocket. And the blue color of the liquid when you pulled it out to drink some, let me guess that it was viper fluid. I assume they still color viper fluid blue. Yeah, they do, said Zach. I figured. As for being bound by secrecy, with the fulfillment of your next request, you will be bound to say nothing about me, this place, or any of the information I will tell you after that, when you decide to go back out to your kind. You won't be allowed to talk about me, write about me, use sign language, charades, or even act in a way that will lead someone to correctly guess about me. You will be bound to secrecy. Of course, I'll also ask you to promise not to give me away, as I'm guessing you're a man of your word. You'll never test the binding anyway, so you won't notice. Nate said the last part with utter confidence. Zach, who had always prided himself on being a man of his word, felt a little nervous at this. Hey, Nate, who are you? How did you know that? Are you omniscient or something? Well, Zach, said Nate sadly, I can't tell you that unless you make the second request. Nate looked away for a minute, then looked back. Well, okay, said Zach. What is this about a second request? What can I ask for? Are you allowed to tell me that? Sure, said Nate, brightening. You're allowed to ask for changes. Changes to yourself. They're like wishes, but they can only affect you. Oh, and before you ask, I can't give you immortality, or omniscience, or omnipresence for that matter. So I might be able to make you gaseous and yet remain alive, and then you could spread through the atmosphere and be sort of omnipresent. But what good would that be? You still wouldn't be omniscient, and thus could only focus on one thing at a time. Not very useful, at least in my opinion. Nate stopped when he realized that Zack was just staring at him. Well, anyway, I'd probably suggest giving you permanent good health. It would negate the methanol now in your system, and you'd be immune to most poisons and diseases. And you'd tend to live for a very long time, barring accident, of course.
Zach, what would you ask for?
I
Donuts.
would personally
We can't
Ask.
ask donuts, it has to be changes to himself.
to myself. I would ask for
Become a donut.
no.
Yes.
I would ask for bare hands because I have the right to bear arms.
But you want bare arms or bare hands?
Yes.
All right.
Anyway,
All right.
you'd be immune to most poisons and diseases, and you'd tend to live a very long time, barring accident, of course. And you'll even have a tendency to recover from accidents well. It always seemed like a good choice for a request to me. Cure the methanol poisoning, huh? Said Zack. And keep me healthy for a long time? Doesn't sound bad at that. And it has to be a request about a change to me? I can't ask to be rich, right? Because that's not a change to me? Right. Could I ask to be a genius and permanently healthy? That takes 2 requests. Yeah, I figured so. But I could ask to be a genius. I could become the smartest scientist in the world, or the best athlete. Well, I could make you very smart, but that wouldn't necessarily make you the best scientist in the world. Or I could make you very athletic, but it wouldn't necessarily make you the best athlete either. You've heard the saying that 99% of genius is hard work? Well, there is some truth to that. I can give you the talent, but I can't make you work hard. It all depends on what you decide to do with it. Okay, I think I understand. And I get a 3rd request after this one? Maybe, said Nate. It depends on what you decide then. There are more rules for the 3rd request that I can only tell you about after the 2nd request. You know how it goes. Nate looks like he'd shrug if only he had shoulders. Okay, well, since I
How do you look like you shrug if you don't have shoulders?
I don't know,
I want
Zach, you were the one who
visual
witnessed it. How did it
presentation.
go?
You're the narrator. You tell me.
You're the witness. You're Zach. Nate
Did it like lift up his
No.
head?
The text as written says Nate looked like he'd shrug if he had shoulders.
Oompa, loompa, doopa da dee.
Thanks, Danny.
You're welcome. You didn't hear me the first time, but that's okay.
No, I didn't.
I did. I just
You'll
chose
see
to ignore
it.
it.
Okay, well, since I'd rather not be blind in a day or two, and permanent health doesn't sound bad, then consider that my 2nd request, officially. Do I need to sign in blood or something? No, said Nate. Just hold out your hand, or heel, or whatever part you want me to bite. I have to bite you again.
Oh,
I said, that's how it works.
Oh,
The best-
hold it.
Zach, what part did you choose?
Nate said,
You know, I'm kind of an earlobe type of guy.
get free
Ah,
ear
I see.
piercing from Nate the Snake. That's how it works. The venom, you know, Nate said apologetically. Jack winced a little and felt his shoulder, where the last bite was. Hey, it didn't hurt anymore, just like Nate had said. That made Zack feel better about the biting business. But still, standing still while a 15-foot snake sunk its fangs into you, Zack stood up, ignoring how good it felt to be able to stand again, and the hunger starting to gnaw at his stomach. Zack tried to decide where he wanted to get bitten. Despite knowing that it wouldn't hurt for long, Zack knew this wasn't going to be easy. Hey, Zack, Nate suddenly said, looking past Zack towards the dunes behind him. Is that something else coming up over there? Zack spun around and looked. Who else could be out there in the middle of nowhere? And did they bring food? Wait a minute, there was nobody over there. What was Nate? Zack let out a bellow. as he
It's
felt
Mussolini.
Zack. What?
What?
It's the Italians. Mussolini.
Nobody's there. Also, yeah, that does fit the Italians then. Anyway, no, just wait a minute. There was nobody over there. What was Nate? Zack let out a bellow as he felt 2 fangs sink into his rear end through his jeans. Zach
Well,
sat down.
Nate's into that.
Oh yeah,
Zach sat down.
just where you wanted it.
Favoring his more tender buttock. I would have decided eventually. I was just thinking about it. You didn't have to hoodwink me like that. I've been doing this a long time, Zach, said Nate confidently. You humans have a hard time sitting still and letting a snake bite you, especially on my size. And besides, admit it, it's only been a couple of minutes and it already doesn't hurt anymore, does it? That's because of the health benefit with this one. I told you that you'd heal quickly now. Yeah, well, still. It's the principle of the thing. And nobody likes being bitten in the butt. Couldn't you have gotten my calf or something instead?
Well, I liked it.
More meat in the typical human butt. And less chance you accidentally kick me or move at the last second. Yeah, right. Alright, so tell me all these wonderful secrets that I now qualify to hear. Okay. Do you want to ask questions first, or do you want me to just start talking? Just talk. I'll sit here and try not to think about food. Man, if we could go
We've
for the
literally
rest
been trying to listen to you talk for the last, like, what, 45 minutes?
yeah.
It's got a point.
Do you want to ask questions first, or do you want me to just start talking? Just talk. I'll sit here and try not to think about food. We could go try to rustle up some food for you first, if you like. Hey, you didn't tell me you had food around here, Nate. Where do we have? Am I in walking distance of town, or can you magically whip up food along with your other powers? Zach was almost shouting with excitement. His stomach had been growling for hours. I was thinking more like I could flush something out of its hole and bite it for you, and then you could skin it and eat it. Assuming you have a knife, that is. I think I'll pass. I can last a little longer before I get desperate enough to eat desert rat, or whatever else it is you find out here. And there's nothing to burn, I'd have to eat it raw. No thanks, just talk. Okay. But I'd better hurry before you start looking at me as food. Nate reared back a little, looking around for a second, and continued. You, Zach, are sitting in the middle of the Garden of Eden. Zach looked around at the sand and dunes, and then looked back at Nate skeptically. Well, that's the best I can figure it anyway, Zach. Stand up and look at the symbol on the rock here. Nate gestured around to the dark stone they were both sitting on with his nose. Zach stood up and looked. Carved into the stone was a bas-relief representation. Carved into the stone in a bas-relief was a representation of a large tree. The angled pole that Nate was wrapped around was coming out of the trunk of the tree, right below where the main branches left the trunk to reach out across the stone. It was very well done. It looked more like a tree had been reduced to 2 dimensions and embedded in the stone than it did like a carving. Zach walked
Wait,
around.
so does this confirm that the Garden of Eden is in the United States?
In the world of this story, yes.
America, keep winning.
Yes, that's another USA W right there.
Okay. Let's see. Zach walked around and looked at the details in the fading light of the setting sun. He wished he'd looked at it while the sun was higher in the sky. Wait! The sun was setting! That meant he was gonna have to spend another night out here. Ah! Zach looked out across the desert for a little bit, then came back and stood next to Nate. All the excitement, I almost forgot, Nate. Which way is it back to town? And how far? I'm eventually gonna have to head back. I'm not sure I'll be able to survive by eating raw desert critters for long. And even if I can, I'm not sure I'll want to. It's about 30 miles that way, Nate pointed, with the rattle on his tail this time. As far as Jack could tell, it was a direction at right angles to the way he'd been going when he was crawling here. But that's 30 miles by the way the crow flies. It's about 40 by the way a man walks. You should be able to do it in about half a day with your improved endurance if you head out early tomorrow. Zach looked out the way the snake had pointed for a few seconds more, and then sat back down. It was getting dark. Not much he could do about heading out right now. And besides, Nate was just about to get to the interesting stuff. Garden of Eden? As best as you can figure it? Well, yeah, as best as I and Samuel could figure it anyway. He figured that the story just got a little mixed up. You know, snake in a tree, offering temptations, making bargains, that kind of stuff. But he could never quite figure out how the Hebrews found out about this spot from across the ocean. He worried about that for a while. Garden of Eden, huh? How long have you been here, Nate? No idea, really. A long time. It never occurred to me to count years, until recently, and by then, of course, it was too late. But I do remember when this whole place was green, so I figure it's been thousands of years at least. So, are you the snake that tempted Eve? Beats me. Maybe. I can't remember if the first one of your kinds that I talked to was female or not, and I never got a name, but it could have been. And I suppose she could have considered my offer to grant requests a temptation, so I've rarely had refusals. Well,
He definitely is. You know how I can tell?
Hmm.
Okay, listen to this. Nathan rhymes with Satan.
Whoa.
No, it doesn't!
Boom.
Is that your... That's
Mind blown. Yes, that's it. That's my entire logic.
Alright, okay. Well, how did you get here then? And what is that white hang on, let's rewind a little bit. And I suppose that she could have considered my offer to grant her a request a temptation, so I've rarely had refusals. Well, how'd you get out here then? And why is that white pole stuck out of the stone there? My father left me here, or I assume it was my dad. It was another snake, much bigger than I was back then. I remember talking to him, but I don't remember if it was in a language or just kind of understanding what he wanted. But one day, he brought me to the stone, told me about it, and asked me to do something for him. I talked it over with him for a while, and then he agreed. I've been here ever since. What is this place? And what did he ask you to do? Well, you see this pole here sticking out of the ground? Nate loosened his coils around the tilted white pole and showed Zach where it descended into the stone. The pole was tilted at about a 45-degree angle and seemed to enter the stone in an 18-inch slot cut into the stone. Zach leaned over and looked. The slot was dark and the pole went down into it as far as Zach could see in the dim light. Zach reached out to touch the pole, but Nate was suddenly there in the way. You can't touch that yet, Zach. Why not? I haven't explained it to you yet. Well, it kind of looks like a lever or something. If you'd push it that way, it would move into the slot. Yes, that's what it does. That's what it is. What does it do? End the world? Oh no, nothing's that drastic. It just ends humanity. I call it the lever of doom. For the last few I call it the lever of doom. For the last few words, Nate had used a deeper, ringing voice. He tried to look serious for a few seconds and then gave up and grinned. Zach was initially startled by Nate's pronouncement, but when Nate grinned, Zach laughed. You almost had me fooled for a second there. What does it really do? Oh, it really ends humanity, like I said. I just thought the voice I used was funny. Didn't you?
So the snake is Hitler.
Oh,
It
entirely possible.
has a lever of doom. Alright?
Like, you make a good point.
Love it. You made me do the German voice without, like, even knowing that, yeah, the snake has access to a lever of doom. Alright. A lever... oh, it really ends humanity, like I said. I just thought the voice I used was funny. Didn't you? Nate continued to grin. A lever to end humanity? Well, what in the world is that for? Why would anyone need to end humanity? Well, I get the idea that maybe humanity was an experiment. Or maybe the big guy just thought that if humanity started going really, really bad, there should be a way to end it. I'm not really sure. All I know are the rules and the guesses that Samuel and I had about why it's here. I didn't think to ask back when I started here. Rules?
Wait,
What rules?
who's Samuel? Did he tell us yet?
He has not told us yet, but Samuel is an important character in the story. So far, we only have Zach Jack, and then Nate the Snake, who we have voiced by Hitler.
Samuel is Mussolini.
He's the Italians.
Yes. We just gotta
The
find out who the
Italians
Japanese
are
are.
coming.
Well, because I really can't do the Japanese voice. So, anyway. The rules are that I can't tell anybody about it, all I know is the rules and the guesses that Samuel and I had about why it's here. I didn't think to ask back when I started here. Rules? What rules? The rules are that I can't tell anybody about it or let them touch it unless they agree to be bound to secrecy by a bite. And that only one human can be bound in that way at a time. That's it. Zach looked somewhat shocked. You mean that I could pull the lever now? You'd let me end humanity? Yes, if you want to. Nate looked at Zach carefully. Do you want to, Zach? No, said Zach, stepping a little further back.
Wait. I can think about this, right?
Zach, you do not actually have access to the lever of doom.
Okay, continue. My bad.
But if you did,
But if you did...
Theoretically, you know, it should be something to ponder.
Well, no, alright, well, here's the next lines you say, okay? No, said Zach, stepping a little further back from the lever. Why in the world would anyone want to end humanity? It'd take a psychotic...
Why? Who would want to do it?
It'd take a psychotic to want that. Or worse, a suicidal psychotic, because it would kill him too, wouldn't it? Yes, being as how he'd be human too. Has anyone ever seriously considered it? Any of those bound to secrecy, that is? Then of course. I think they've all seriously considered it at one time or another. Being given that kind of responsibility makes you sit down and think. Or so I'm told. Samuel considered it several times. He'd often get disgusted with humanity, come out here and just hold the lever for a while. But he never pulled it, or you wouldn't be here. Zach sat down, well back from the lever. He looked thoughtful and puzzled at the same time. After a bit, he said, "So this makes me judge of humanity? I get to decide whether they keep going or just end? Me?" "That seems to be it," agreed Nate. "What kind of criteria do I use to decide? How do I make this decision? Am I supposed to decide if they're good, or if too many of them are bad, or that they're just going the wrong way? Is there a set of rules for that?"
You need a sidekick named Kronk.
No, because you have
Pull
to be
the
the one to
lever.
pull the lever. No, but you have to be the one to pull the lever. Nobody else can pull the lever.
Oh,
It-
my
it-
mistake.
it-
My mistake. You have to change your name to Kronk.
You have to change your name to Kronk first, of course, yes.
There you go. Yeah, yes, of course.
But before you change your name, you have to make a recording of yourself saying to pull the lever. And then
Well-
as you fade out of existence, Infinity War style, you also have the recording saying wrong lever.
I was just say have Nate say, Kronk, pull the lever.
Kronk, pull the lever! The wrong lever, Kronk! That's the wrong lever! The wrong... Alright, anyway. What kind of criteria do I use to decide? How do I make this decision? Am I supposed to decide if they're good, or too many of them are bad, or that they're going the wrong way? Is there a set of rules for that? No. You pretty much just have to decide on your own. It's up to you, however you want to decide it. I guess that you're just supposed to know. But what if I get mad at someone? Or some girl dumps me and I feel horrible? Or if I get kicked out of art school? I 100% added that.
Yeah.
What? No.
Couldn't I make a
wouldn't have-
mistake?
I would have suspected that.
Couldn't I make a mistake? How do I know that I won't screw up? Nate gave his kind of snake-like shrug again. You don't. You just have to try your best, Zach. Zach sat there for a while, staring off into the desert that was rapidly getting dark, chewing on a fingernail. Suddenly, Zach turned around and looked at the snake. "Nate, was Samuel the one bound to this before me?" "Yes. He was a good guy. Talked to me a lot. Taught me to read and brought me books. I think I still have a good pile of them buried in the sand around here somewhere. I still miss him. He died a few months ago." "Sounds like a good guy," agreed Zach. "How did he handle this when you first told him? What did he do?" "Well, he sat down for a while, thinking about it for a bit, and then asked me some questions, much like you're doing." "What did he ask you, if you're allowed to tell me?" "He asked me about the third request." I know Zach was thinking something very different when I said third ruh.
I was.
Aha! Aha! It was Zach's turn to grin. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him the rules for the third request. That to get the third request, you have to agree to this whole thing. That if it ever comes to the point that you really think that humanity should be ended, that you'll come here and end it. You won't avoid it, and you won't wimp out. And you'd be bound to do it too, Zach." Zach looked back out into the darkness for a while. Nate watched him, waiting. "Nate," continued Zach quietly, eventually. "What did Samuel ask for with his third request?" Nate sounded like he was grinning again as he replied, also quietly. "Wisdom, Jack. He asked for wisdom, as much as I could give him." "Okay," said Zach suddenly, standing up and facing away from Nate. "Give it to me." Nate looked at Zach's backside. "Give you what, Zach?"
what?
"What?" It's word for word. Nate looked at Jack, but I substituted for Zach. Zach's backside.
All
Give me
right.
Zach. Give me
He
that
already
wisdom.
bit me in the butt.
He already bit you in the butt once. Give me that wisdom. The same stuff that Samuel asked for. If it helped him, maybe it'll help me too. Zach turned his head to look back over the shoulder at Nate. It did help him, right? He said it did, but he seemed a little quieter afterwards. Like he had a lot to think about. Well, yeah, I can see that. So, give it to me. Zach turned away from Nate again, bent over slightly, and tensed up. Nate watched Zach tense up with a little exasperation. If he bit Zach now, Zach would likely jump out of his skin and maybe hurt them both. You remember that you'll be bound to destroy humanity if it ever looks like it needs it, right, Zach? Asked Nate, shifting position. Yeah, I got that, replied Zach, eyes squeezed tightly shut and body tense, not noticing the change in direction of Nate's voice. And, Nate continued from his new position, do you remember that you'll turn bright purple, grow big horns, and extra eyes? Yeah. Hey, wait a minute, said Zach, opening his eyes, straightening up and turning around. Paul, he didn't even see Nate there. With the moonlight, Zach could see that the lever extended up from its slot in the rock without the snake wrapped around it. Zach, from behind him, heard Nate's, "Just kidding!" right before he felt the now familiar piercing pain, this time in the other buttock. Zach sat on the edge of the dark stone in the rapidly cooling air, his feet extending out into the sand. He stared out into the darkness, listening to the wind stir at the sand, occasionally rubbing his butt from where he'd been recently bitten.
And can now
Nate
smile
had-
with 4 cheeks.
What?
And can now smile with all 4 cheeks.
Yes, he can. He stared out into the darkness, listening to the wind stir the sand, occasionally rubbing his butt where he'd recently been bitten. There, finally. Nate had left for a little while. Nate had left for a little while, had come back with a desert rodent-shaped bulge somewhere in his middle, and was now wrapped back around the lever, his tongue flicking out into the desert night's air, the only sign that he was still awake. Occasionally, Zach, with his toes absent-mindedly digging in the sand while he thought, would ask Nate a question without turning around. Nate, do accidents count? Nate lifted his head a minute. What do you mean, Zach? What do you mean, Zach? Zach tilted his head back like he was looking at the stars. You know, accidents. If I accidentally fall on the lever without meaning to, does that still wipe out humanity? Yes, I'm pretty sure it does, Zach. I'd suggest you be careful about that if you start feeling wobbly, Nate said with some amusement. A little later, does it have to be me that pulls the lever? Asked Zach. That's the rule, Zach. Nobody else can pull it. No, I mean, does it have to be my hand? Could I pull the lever with a rope tied around it? Or push it with a stick? Or throw a rock? Yes, those should work. So I'm not sure how complicated you could get. Samuel thought about trying to build some kind of remote control for it once, but gave it up. Everything he'd build would be gone by the next sunrise, if it was touching the stone or over it. I told him that in the past, others that had been bound had tried to bury the lever so they wouldn't be tempted to pull it, but every time the stones or sand or whatever had disappeared. Wow. Cool, said Zach. He leaned back until only his elbows kept him off the stone and looked up in the sky. Nate, how long did Samuel live? One of his wishes was for health, too, right? Asked Zach. Yes, it was. He lived 167 years, Zach. Wow. That's almost 140 more years I'll live, if I live as long. Do you know what he died of, Nate? He died of getting tired of living, Zach. Nate said, sounding somewhat sad. Zach turned his head to look at Nate in the starlight. Nate looked back. Samuel knew he wasn't going to be able to stay in society. He figured that they'd eventually see him still alive and start questioning it, though he decided that he'd have to disappear after a while. He faked his death once, but changed his mind. He decided it was too early and he could stay for a little longer. He wasn't very fond of mankind, but he liked the attention. Most of the time, anyway. His daughter and then his wife dying almost did him in, though. He didn't stay in society much longer after that. He eventually came out here to spend time talking to me and thinking about pulling the lever. A few months ago, he told me he had had enough. It was his time. And then he just died? Asked Zach. Nate shook his head a little. He made his 4th request, Zach. There's only one thing you can ask for the 4th request. It's the last bite. After a bit, Nate continued. He told me that he was tired, that it was his time. He reassured me that someone new would show up soon, like they always had. After another pause, Nate finished. Samuel's body disappeared off the stone with the sunrise. Zach lay back down and looked at the sky, leaving Nate alone with his memories. It was a long time until Zach's breathing evened out into sleep. Zach woke with the sunrise the next morning. He was a little chilled with the morning desert air, but overall was feeling pretty good. Well, except that his stomach was grumbling and he wasn't willing to eat raw desert rat. So, after getting directions to town from Nate, making sure he knew how to get back, and reassuring Nate that he'd be back soon, Zach started the long walk back to town. With his new health and Nate's good directions, he made it back easily. Zach caught a bus back to the city and showed up for work the next day, a little worse for the wear, with a story about getting lost in the desert and walking back out. Within a couple of days, Zach had talked a friend with a tow truck into going back out into the desert with him to fetch the SUV. They found it after a couple of hours of searching and towed it back without incident. Zach was careful not to even look in the direction of Nate's lever, though their path back didn't come within sight of it. Before the next weekend, Zach had gone to a couple of stores, including a bookstore, and has gotten his SUV back from the mechanic, with a warning to avoid any more joyriding in the desert. On Saturday, Zach headed back to see Nate. Zach parked a little way out of the small town near Nate, loaded up his new backpack with camping gear and the things he was bringing for Nate, and then started walking. He figured that walking would leave the least trail, and he knew that while not many people camped in the desert, it wasn't unheard of and shouldn't really raise suspicions. Zach had brought more books for Nate. Recent books, magazines, newspapers, some things that would catch Nate up with what was happening in the world. Others that were just good books to read. He spent the weekend with Nate, and then headed out again, telling Nate that
I
he'd
know
be
a
back...
book he probably brought.
Yes.
Excuse me. He spent the weekend with Nate and then headed out again, telling Nate that he'd be back again soon, but that he had things to do first. Over 4 months later, Zach was back again to see Nate. This time, he brought a laptop with him, a specially modified laptop. It had a solar recharger, special filters and seals to keep out the sand, a satellite link-up, and a special keyboard and joystick that Zach had hoped that a 15-foot rattlesnake would be able to use. And it had been
League of
hacked.
Legends.
Nate's number 1 on the leaderboard.
Nate is somehow the world's greatest League of Legends player. I mean, if you're just sitting in the desert with nothing else to do, you probably would get pretty good at League.
So nothing's changed.
So nothing's changed. And it had been hacked to not give out his location to the satellite. After that, Zach could email Nate to keep in touch, but still visited him fairly regularly, at least once or twice a year. After the first year, Zach quit his job. For some reason, the wisdom he'd been given, and the knowledge that he could live for over 150 years, working in a 9-to-5 job for someone else didn't seem that worthwhile anymore. Zach went back to school. Eventually, Zach started writing. Perhaps because of the wisdom, or perhaps because of his new perspective, he wrote well. People liked what he wrote, and he became well known for it. After a time, Zach bought an RV and started traveling around the country for book signings and readings. But he still remembered to drop by and visit Nate occasionally. On one of his visits, Nate seemed quieter than usual. Not that Nate had been a fountain of joy lately. Zach's best guess was that Nate was still missing Samuel, and though Zach had tried, he still hadn't been able to replace Samuel in Nate's eyes. Nate had been getting quieter each visit. But on this visit, Nate didn't even speak when Zach walked up to the lever. He nodded at Zach, then went back to staring out into the desert. Zach, respecting Nate's silence, sat down and waited. After a few minutes, Nate spoke. Zach, I have someone to introduce you to. Zach looked surprised. Someone to introduce me to? Zach looked around and then looked carefully back at Nate. Does this have something to do with the big guy? No. This is more personal. I want you to meet my son. Nate looked over at the nearest sand dune. Sammy! Zach watched as a 4-foot-long desert rattlesnake crawled up from behind the dune and up to the stone base of the lever. Alright, what voice does Sammy get?
Italian.
Yeah, he's definitely Italian.
Yo, Zach! Said the new, much smaller snake. Yo, Sammy.
Too much
Zach
sauce.
Zach looked at Nate. Named after Samuel, I assume? Nate nodded. Zach, I've got a favor to ask you. Could you show Sammy around for me? Nate unwrapped himself from the lever and slithered over to the edge of the stone and looked across the sands. Then Samuel first told me about the world and brought me books and pictures. I wished that I could go see it. I wanted to see the great forests, the canyons, the cities, even the other
I have a
deserts.
question.
Yes.
Who's the mother?
Nate reproduces asexually.
I'm just imagining that.
Oh.
Alright, continue.
Hey.
Well, there's no mother in the story, so that's my answer. What? Do you have a better answer?
Maybe
Eve.
Samuel was the mother.
Samuel's been dead.
That's why he's so fond of Samuel. It makes so much sense.
That makes sense. Samuel was his
has been
wife.
dead for years. His body vanished.
Maybe
Yeah,
it
it's
takes
just
a
what he
long
says.
time
He
to
might
be
be
pregnant.
Sam's dead. Samuel has been dead. You can't be dead and pregnant.
Have
No,
you
the
ever
snake
tried?
was pregnant, and Samuel gave the snake his seed, and then Samuel died, but the snake became pregnant, and then over time, it's a long pregnancy. I don't know. It's a 15-foot rattlesnake, so obviously it's going to be abnormal. So then after many, many years, they give birth. It's simple enough.
I am holding my head in my hands.
It makes perfect sense to me.
Taking it.
Asking
Thank you,
God,
Ben.
why did you make me think this was a good idea?
It was your idea.
I don't know what you expected.
Anyway.
I'm going to
Where
assume
were
no
we?
one heard my answer though.
Yeah. Wait, no, what was your answer? We didn't hear it.
Eve.
No. Well, I mean, pick an answer, gentlemen. What are we going with?
Samuel.
Asexual reproduction, Samuel or Eve?
Samuel.
Definitely Samuel.
I figured I was going to lose that one pretty quickly.
Yeah. My vote is still asexual, so, you know, I guess it was just Evan deciding the vote. When Samuel first told me about the world and brought me books and pictures, I wished that I could go see it. I wanted to see the great forests, the canyons, the cities, even the other deserts, to see if they felt and smelled the same. I want my son to have that chance, to see the world, before he becomes bound here like I have been. He's seen it in pictures over the computer and that you brought me. He's seen it in pictures over the computers that you brought me. But I hear that it's not the same. That being there is different. I want him to have that. Think you can do that for me, Jack? Zach? Zach nodded. This was obviously very important to Nate, so Zach didn't even joke about taking a talking rattlesnake out to see the world. Zach didn't even joke about taking a talking rattlesnake out to see the world. I don't know why that phrase was so difficult. Anyway. Yeah, I can do that for you, Nate. Is that all you need?
That's what Samuel would have wanted.
I mean, the thing is named Sam, so, you know. Is that all you need? Zach could sense that there was something more. Nate looked at Sammy. Sammy looked back at Nate for a second and said, "Oh, yeah, I've got to go back. Back in a little bit, Zach. Nice to meet you." Sammy slithered back.
So stupid.
Why did you make me do that? Nice to meet you. My name is Sammy. I'm the snake. Anyway. Nate watched Sammy disappear and then looked back at Zach. Zach, this is my first son. My first offspring through all the years. You don't even know what it took for me to find a mate.
Oh, we know. We know.
Oh, we know what it took.
Nate grinned to himself the very next sentence. But anyway, I had a son for a reason. I'm tired. I'm ready for it to be over. I needed a replacement. Zach
So
considered this.
he just chose to have a son.
He just chose to have a son. He decided, I'm going to have a son. He sought out a mate, and he now has a son.
Seems kind of
Alright.
sexist.
I mean, first off,
Yeah.
he's a magical snake. There's no telling he is the.
Yeah, where are
I'm
the women in this story?
Well, Samuel.
Oh, you're right.
But anyway, I had a son for a reason. I'm tired. I'm ready for it to be over. I needed a replacement. Zach considered this for a minute. So you're ready to come see the world and you wanted him to watch the lever while you're gone? Nate shook his head. No, Zach. You're a better guesser than that. You've already figured it out. I'm bound here. There's only one way for me to leave here, and I'm ready. It's my time to die. Zach looked more closely at Nate. He could tell Nate had thought about this, probably for quite a while. Zach had trouble imagining what it would be like to be as old as Nate, but Zach could already tell that in another 100 or 200 years, he might be getting tired of life himself. Zach could understand Samuel's decision, and now Nate's. So, all Zach said was, "What do you want me to do?" Nate nodded. Thanks, Zach. I only want two things. One, show Sammy around the world. Let him get his fill of it until he's ready to come back here and take over. Two, give me the fourth request. I can't just decide to die, not any more than you can. I can't just decide to die, not any more than you can. I won't even die of old age like you eventually will, even though it'll be a long time from now. I need to be killed. Once Sammy is back here, ready to take over, I'll be able to die. And I need you to kill me. I've even thought about how. Poisons and other drugs won't work on me, and I've seen pictures of snakes that were shot. Some of them live for days, so that's out too. So, I want you to bring back a sword. Nate turned away to look back to the dune that Sammy had gone behind. I'd say an axe, but that's somewhat undignified. Putting my head on the ground or a chopping block like that. No, I like a sword. A time-honored way of going out. A dignified way.
He doesn't want to be asked about. He doesn't want to ask about it later.
Alrighty.
That was no.
Alright. A dignified way to die. And most importantly, it should work, even on me. Are you willing to do that for me, Jack? Zach? Are you willing to do that for me, Zach? Nate turned back to look at Zach. Nate turned back to look at Zach. Yeah, Nate, replied Zach solemnly. I think I can handle that. Nate nodded. Good! He turned back towards the dune and shouted, Sammy! Zach's about ready to leave! Then quietly, thank you, Zach. Zach didn't have anything to say to that, so he waited for Sammy to make it back to the lever, nodded to him, nodded one final time to Nate, and then headed back into the desert with young Sammy following. Over the next several years, Sammy and Zach kept in touch with Nate through email as they went about their adventures. They made a goal of visiting every country in the world and did a respectable job of it. Sammy had a natural gift for languages, as Zach
Even
expected
North
to.
Sentinel Island? Do you know about that island?
A respectable job doesn't mean they 100% did all of it.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm
they
just
didn't
trying to
do all of
cover
it.
the
That's not
boundaries here.
respectable.
Also, does North Sentinel Island count as a country?
Did they at
I
least
think
see
it's part of
Santa?
India, technically.
Did they at least see what, Danny?
Santa.
I'd imagine so.
Good.
How about North
Good.
Korea?
Well, I'd imagine they would have tried.
Well, if they did try, they wouldn't be able to go back to Nate. Unless they're that skilled.
I don't know. Listen, man, I just tell the stories and I just adapt them with funny voices and naming the characters after my friends.
I'm just trying to understand the story. Did they go to North Korea? Answer the question.
We don't know.
Answer the question. It's a
don't
yes
know.
or no.
No, the answer is we were not advised as to whether or not they traveled to North Korea or not.
Okay, but did they?
We don't know.
But you do know.
No, I
You're the one
don't.
telling the story.
It's your story.
They thought about it. They were nearly shot at as they attempted, and so they didn't.
How does
That
Nate
was-
feel about that? Like, does
Nate
Nate
doesn't know.
feel it? He doesn't know? So they're keeping it a secret now. That doesn't seem very wise.
Wow.
All right,
The
they
character
emailed
development.
Nate, and Nate said, "Yeah, that's a pretty dumb course of action. Good on you for not trying to get shot over North Korea."
So he doesn't like feel like, hey, you put my son in danger. I'm gonna kill you now.
Well, he intentionally didn't go into North Korea, which was keeping his son out of danger.
I thought you said he did go to North Korea. At
He
least they
attempted,
tried.
and then they didn't.
Yeah, so trying is stupid. If I, as a parent, would be mad about that, if someone's trying to take my son into North Korea. That's just me, though.
But would you take your son into North Korea?
Maybe.
You just don't want other people doing it.
Yeah, I don't trust other people.
Anyway. Over the translator. They made a goal of visiting every country in the world and did a respectable job of it. Sammy had a natural gift for languages, as Zack expected he would, and even ended up acting as a translator for Zack in a few of the countries. Zack managed to keep the talking rattlesnake hidden, even so, and by the time they were nearing the end of their tour of countries, Sammy had only been spotted a few times. While there were several people that had seen enough to startle them greatly, nobody had enough evidence to prove anything, and while a few wild rumors and stories followed Zack and Sammy around, nothing ever hit the newspapers or the public in general. When they finished their tour of countries, Zack suggested that they try some undersea diving. They did, and spelunking. They did that too. Sammy finally drew the line at visiting Antarctica. He'd come to realize Zack was stalling. After talking to his dad about it over email, he figured out that Zack probably didn't want to have to kill Nate.
Why would
Nate
you draw
told-
the line at Antarctica?
He's
Sounds
a
like a cool
cold-blooded
place.
reptile.
But he didn't draw the line at North Korea? He's like, oh, that's fine, but Antarctica? Nah, I can't do that. And
he go
Zack
to the
is
North
wise.
Pole?
Zack can find some kind of solution. Yeah, you just said he visited Santa, alright?
Yeah, you didn't answer. You didn't answer, Danny. Did you?
I did say he visited Santa, but you could visit Santa at the mall.
Oh, so now... whatever.
If there were a Kim Jong-un at the mall, he would have visited them too, so he could check off.
was there?
North Korea. No! What mall has a Kim Jong-un for kids to visit?
Probably one in North Korea.
Hey, good point.
Okay. Alright. He'd come to realize that Zack was stalling. After talking to his dad about it over email, he figured out that Zack probably didn't want to have to kill Nate. Nate told Sammy that humans could be squeamish about killing friends and acquaintances. So, Sammy eventually put his tail down, as he didn't have a foot, and told Zack that it was time. He was ready to go back and take up his duties from his dad. Zack delayed it a little more by insisting that they go back to Japan and buy an appropriate sword. He even stretched it a little more by getting lessons in how to use the sword. But eventually, he learned as much as he was likely to without dedicating his life to it, and was getting definitely competent enough to take the head off a snake. It was time to head back and see Nate. When they got back to the US, Zack took the old RV out of storage where he and Sammy had left it after their tour of the 50 states. He loaded up Sammy and the sword, and they headed for the desert. When they got to the small town that Zack had been trying to find those years ago when he'd met Nate, Zack was in a funk. He didn't really feel like walking all the way out there. Not only that, but he'd forgotten to figure the travel time correctly, and it was late afternoon. They'd either have to spend the night in town and walk out tomorrow, or walk in the dark. As Zack was afraid that if he waited one more night he might lose his resolve, he decided to go ahead and drive the RV out there. It was only going to be this once, and Zack would go back and cover the tracks afterward.
And then you get stuck again.
Oh, it's a looping story! Evan, you're a genius.
They ought to be able... No, it's a much better punchline than that. They ought to be able to make it out there by nightfall if they drove, and then they could get it over tonight. Zack told Sammy to email Nate that they were coming as he drove out of sight of the town on the road. They then pulled off the road and headed out into the desert. Everything went well until they got to the sand dunes. Zack had been nursing the RV along the whole time, over the rocks, through the creek beds, revving the engine the few times they almost got stuck. When they came to the dunes, Zack didn't really think about it. He just downshifted and headed up the first one.
Hold
By
on,
the
wait a
third-
minute. Wait a minute. I just realized something. You're telling me that Zack has the ability to repeatedly come back to this place in the middle of the desert, like perfectly, he can find it, he's good at finding it, but he was not able to find his way back to civilization when he first got stuck.
Well, that was before he had the gift of wisdom.
I don't think that's how wisdom works.
Anyway,
I had to ponder that one.
perhaps he
Nate
could
got
figure
it
it out. After the help,
I
after
pondered
the
it.
help-
Evan's correct.
Yeah, he pondered, and then after the help from Nate, he was able to figure it out, and then it became a lot easier.
I don't believe you. I think you're gaslighting me.
Well, I think I'm the one telling the story.
Oh, now you have control of it.
Wow.
We're getting close to the end, boys. Do you want this to be over with?
No, I like the North Korea story.
You want a
Yeah,
Zack
North
and
Korea
Sammy
is
go
a
to North
very
Korea?
important part of this story.
Part 2, Zack and Sammy go to North Korea. As Sammy's speaking Italian the entire time.
Hey, we should have checked out the lamp post.
Then Jonathan, as the narrator, learns Italian just for the story.
I learned Italian and North Korean
And German.
and German. When they came to the dunes, Zack didn't really think about it. He just downshifted and headed up the first one. By the third dune, Zack started to regret that he'd decided to try driving on the sand. The RV was fishtailing and losing traction. Jack was having to work it up each dune slowly and was trying to keep from losing control every time they came over the top and slid down the other side. Sammy had come up to sit in the passenger seat, coiled up and laughing at Zack's driving. Sammy had come up to sit in the passenger seat, coiled up and laughing at Zack's driving.
Good for
Hang on
him.
one second.
Yeah.
There's just a weird noise outside my house. I'll be right back.
It's Sammy.
Wait, what? It's
I don't know.
Samuel.
What's going on?
They're coming to visit you.
They're coming to visit.
Samuel's gonna make you pregnant. Wait,
Whoa.
wait. So Nate's the one who got pregnant because Samuel died. So Samuel's
Yes.
the father,
Yes.
And Nate's
and
the
also
mother.
the mother.
which means Samuel will be the father to Jonathan's kid, like the narrator here. Which means Jonathan has to be a female.
Yes.
All right, just making sure I got that logic correct. He's gonna come back and like while editing this and just hear that. What do you think Jonathan would name his son or daughter?
Adolf.
Adolf. No, I can't say the last name.
Why not?
Yeah, Jonathan will just cut it out. Yeah.
What if it's a
Okay.
girl?
It's not. Well, it technically was. It was my nana. She's home.
Yeah, that's what we were talking.
Samuel's looking for her.
Okay. Anyway.
Adolf Ed?
You know I have the recording of whatever you said, right?
Oh yeah, we know.
Oh, we know.
Alright. Alright, anyway. Sammy had come to sit in the passenger seat, coiled up and laughing at Zack's driving. As they came over the top of the fourth dune, the biggest one yet, Zack saw that this was the final dune. The stone...
Hold on, I have a question.
Yes.
How much time has passed? How long were they traveling to North Korea and back?
I don't know. A couple...
I guess this is, wait, this was from Japan because of the sword.
It has been years. Sammy has seen a lot. It has been years since they left.
So he's seen the poverty-stricken areas of Africa?
More than likely.
What are his thoughts on it? Give me a detailed description of what he thinks about that.
I do not know what Sammy thinks, for I am not a snake.
Oh, again, and now you don't know. You're just so inconsistent.
Me, man.
You know, I'm starting to think you just made up this whole story. Like I'm starting to think this never actually happened.
Yeah, you're losing credibility, man.
As they came over the top of the fourth dune, the biggest one yet, Zack saw that this was the final dune. The stone, the lever, and somewhere Nate waited below. Zack put on the brakes, but he'd gone a little too far. The RV started slipping down the other side. Zack
It's gonna hit the lever.
Zach tried turning the wheel, but he didn't have enough traction. He pumped the brakes, no response. They started sliding down the hill faster and faster. Zach felt a shock go through him as he suddenly realized that they were heading for the lever. He looked down. The RV was directly on course for it. If Zach didn't do something, the RV would hit it. He was about to end humanity. Zach steered.
Wait,
more
what if he? Wait! Before you say the solution,
No,
I have a
he
solution.
didn't pull the lever.
Remember the question of you can use like ropes and stuff. So the only way to get out of this is if Zach kills himself. That you think about it, he would not be pulling the lever at that point. He'd be dead.
All right,
responsibility would be off of him at that point.
That's a good solution. But anyway,
So
let's see.
grab the gun and point it at your head.
Let's see. Let's see the
I
story.
mean, he does have a sword.
Let's see how the story plays out. All right.
I just wanted to point that solution out because it is a valid solution.
It is a valid solution. The dune was too steep. Zach steered more frantically, trying to get traction. It still wasn't working. The dune was too steep and the sand too loose. In a split second, Zach realized that his only chance would be once he hit the stone around the lever. He should have traction on the stone for just a second before he hit the lever. He wouldn't have time to stop, but he would be able to steer away. Zach took a better grip on the steering wheel and tried to turn the RV a little bit. Every little bit would help. He'd have to time his turn just right. The RV got to the bottom of the dune, sliding at an amazing speed in the sand. Just before they reached the stone, Zach looked across it to check that they were still heading for the lever. They were. But Zach noticed something else that he hadn't seen from the top of the dune. Nate wasn't wrapped around the lever. He was off to the side of the lever, but still on the
Nate
stone,
over.
waiting for them. The problem was he was waiting on the same side of the lever that Zach was heading to, that Zach was going to be able to steer towards to avoid the lever. The RV was already starting to drift that way a little in its mad rush across the sand, and there was no way that Zach was going to be able to get around the lever on the other side. Zach had an instant of realization. It was either going to hit the lever or run over Nate. He glanced at Sammy and saw that Sammy realized the same thing. Zach took a firmer grip on the steering wheel as the RV ran up on the stone. Shouting to Sammy as he pulled the steering wheel, "Better Nate than lever!" he ran over the snake. The end. Better Nate than lever.
I don't get it.
But you've never heard the phrase "better late than never"?
Nope.
What?
I think you made it up.
I didn't.
You already ruined your credibility, John.
No,
Yeah,
the
you-
entire story.
None of this happened. This is all a
What?
lie.
It just.
I came into this thinking it was real. I was about to
Gaslighted.
go to Utah or something.
It was funny. It was.
I was
fun.
gonna go to Utah tomorrow to find the Garden of Eden, but no,
But-
you ruined it.
But better Nate than lever.
I'm literally known as the guy. Excuse me. I'm literally known as the guy that does
No,
the
Zach is-
stupid pun.
No, he's got a point.
Yeah.
I'm known as the punny guy, the one that does all the puns, even if they're terrible or not. And I'm pretty sure this entire story was way too and beyond for a pun.
Yes.
I mean, like,
The entire story was just for one crappy pun.
I don't
I was
know if I
expecting
should be
this
proud of you or if I
philosophically.
should be absolutely upset.
wait. So did he run over Nate?
Yeah, he ran over Nate. Better Nate than lever, and ran over the snake.
What was Sammy's
Did Nate
reaction? In an Italian accent. Give me his reaction.
Ah! I don't know. I'm guessing.
Is that how Italians yell?
Mamma
Ciao.
mia!
Ah, too much sauce. The blood splattered on the windshield.
But there we go. This has been the first edition, and probably only edition, of Storytime with Jonathan.
That was a fantastic story.
Thank you. Thank you.